The Converging Paths, Upanishadic Wisdom in Neuroplasticity. The connection between the ancient teachings of the Upanishads and the modern discovery of neuroplasticity creates a fascinating bridge between spiritual philosophy and contemporary neuroscience. While the Upanishads describe the nature of consciousness through introspective, experiential language, neuroscience maps the physical correlates of these experiences, revealing how the brain adapts and learns. Together, they offer a powerful, integrated understanding of human transformation that speaks directly to how we can consciously shape our inner lives. The Upanishadic blueprint: the mind is a field of transformation. The Upanishads, composed over 2.5 millennia ago in ancient India, are not religious texts in a conventional sense but philosophical explorations of reality, Brahman, and the self, Atman. They form the concluding portions of the Vedas and are considered the pinnacle of Vedic thought, focusing not on ritualistic practices but on the nature of existence, consciousness, and liberation. Central to their teaching is the radical idea that our ordinary, conditioned mind, with its habitual patterns of desire, fear, and attachment, obscures our true nature, but that this very mind can be systematically cultivated, refined, and ultimately transcended. The trainable mind. The Upanishads present the mind, manas, as a dynamic and malleable field of habits, impressions, and perceptions. It is not viewed as a fixed entity with unchangeable characteristics, but rather as an instrument that can be sharpened through focused awareness, self-inquiry, jnana, and meditation, dhyan. The Katha Upanishad famously compares the body to a chariot, the senses to horses, and the mind to the reins that control them. This metaphor implies that the mind is the crucial link between the external world of sensory experience and the inner world of understanding. Just as a skilled charioteer can control powerful horses, a trained mind can direct the senses and guide the individual toward higher knowledge. Without such training, the mind remains restless, jumping from one sensory object to another, perpetuating cycles of desire and suffering. Perception shapes reality. A core tenet woven throughout the Upanishads is captured in the Sanskrit phrase, yad bhavam tad bhavati, as one thinks, so one becomes. This principle appears in various forms across different Upanishads and carries profound implications. It suggests that our experienced reality is not an objective given, independent of the observer, but is in large part constructed by our thoughts, beliefs, and perceptual filters. The Chandogya Upanishad contains the famous teaching of Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art, which points to the identity of the individual self with ultimate reality. Realizing this truth requires a fundamental shift in perception, a transformation in how one sees oneself and the world. The mind that identifies with the limited ego experiences a world of separation and duality, while the mind that purifies itself and turns inward begins to perceive unity. This is not mere positive thinking. It is an assertion that the quality of our consciousness determines the quality of our reality. Transformation through inner discipline. The Upanishads emphasize that lasting change is achieved not through external rituals or sacrifices alone, but through inner discipline, ethical living, dharma, deep reflection, and sustained meditative practice. The Prashna Upanishad offers a particularly relevant exploration of how the life force, prana, and the mind are interwoven, and how focused awareness can direct this vital energy. It describes prana as the fundamental energy behind all life processes, and the mind as that which directs this energy toward various objects and experiences. When the mind is scattered and undisciplined, prana is dissipated. When the mind is concentrated through meditation and self-discipline, prana becomes focused and potent, leading to heightened awareness and spiritual insight. This ancient understanding aligns remarkably with modern ideas of cognitive training and attentional focus as tools for reshaping mental habits and emotional responses. The scientific discovery, neuroplasticity in the brain's capacity for change. Neuroplasticity is the revolutionary scientific discovery that the brain is not a static, hardwired machine with fixed circuitry determined solely by genetics and early development. Instead, it is a remarkably malleable organ, capable of profound structural and functional change throughout the entire lifespan. This paradigm shift, which gained momentum in the latter half of the 20th century, overturned centuries of neurological dogma that viewed the adult brain as incapable of significant reorganization. Research now demonstrates that the brain continuously remodels itself in response to experience, learning, and even injury. Mechanisms of neuroplastic change. Neuroplasticity operates through several interconnected mechanisms. First, the brain can form entirely new neural connections between neurons, a process called synaptogenesis. Second, existing connections can be strengthened or weakened based on the frequency and intensity of their activation. This is often summarized by the principle of synaptic plasticity, where frequently used pathways become more efficient and robust, while rarely used connections may weaken and eventually be pruned away. Third, in certain brain regions such as the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory formation, the brain can even generate new neurons, a process known as neurogenesis. Together, these mechanisms allow the brain to adapt to new environments, learn new skills, recover from injuries, and modify ingrained behavioral patterns. Hebb's principle, the foundation of plastic learning. As neuroscientist Donald Hebb famously postulated in 1949, neurons that fire together, wire together. This elegant principle captures the essence of experience-dependent plasticity. When two neurons are repeatedly activated simultaneously, the connection between them strengthens. Conversely, when neurons fire out of sync, their connection weakens. This means that every repeated thought, every practiced skill, and every ingrained habit physically reinforces specific neural pathways while allowing others to diminish. A pianist who practices daily literally builds and strengthens the neural networks responsible for finger coordination and musical interpretation. A person who habitually responds to stress with anxiety strengthens the neural circuitry underlying that anxiety response. The brain, in effect, becomes a physical record of our most frequent experiences and mental activities. Experience is the sculptor. The implications of neuroplasticity are profound. The brain is not simply a static organ that we are born with and gradually lose as we age. It is a dynamic system that is constantly being reshaped by our experiences, thoughts, and behaviors. This understanding places enormous responsibility and agency in our hands. If the brain changes in response to what we do and think, then the intentional cultivation of certain mental states, such as focused attention, compassion, or mindfulness, can literally alter the brain's structure and function. What we practice, we become, not just metaphorically, but physically and neurologically. This scientific insight resonates deeply with the ancient Upanishadic understanding of the mind as a field of transformation, where disciplined practice leads to fundamental change in consciousness. Points of convergence, where ancient insight meets modern data. 1. Meditation is mental and neural training. The Upanishads present meditation, dhyan, as the primary tool for stilling the mind's restless chatter and turning awareness inward to directly perceive the deeper self, Atman. This inward turn is not merely a relaxation technique, it is a rigorous discipline aimed at uncovering the very ground of consciousness. The Mundaka Upanishad describes meditation as the process by which the mind, purified and concentrated, becomes like a mirror that can reflect the true nature of the self. Through sustained practice, the meditator moves beyond identification with thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences, eventually realizing the timeless, unchanging awareness that underlies all changing phenomena. This realization is liberation, moksha, freedom from the cycles of suffering caused by mistaken identification with the transient. Neuroscientific research over the past 2 decades has provided compelling evidence that consistent meditation practice physically reshapes the brain. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging (fMRI) and electroencephalography (EEG) have shown that long-term meditators exhibit structural and functional changes in multiple brain regions. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for attention, executive function, and self-regulation, shows increased gray matter density and enhanced activity. The amygdala, which plays a central role in processing fear and emotional reactivity, shows reduced gray matter and decreased reactivity, correlating with greater emotional resilience. The anterior cingulate cortex and insula, areas involved in interoception and self-awareness, also demonstrate enhanced structure and function. These changes are not merely correlational. Longitudinal studies have shown that even relatively short periods of meditation training, such as 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, can produce measurable changes in brain structure and function. Meditation, from a neuroscientific perspective, is a form of mental training that harnesses neuroplasticity to cultivate attention, emotional balance, and self-awareness. 2. The power of thought to sculpt reality. The Upanishadic view holds that the mind colors our perception of the world, creating a veil, maya, that obscures ultimate reality. This is not to deny the existence of the external world, but to emphasize that our experience of it is mediated and conditioned by mental filters. The Isha Upanishad speaks of covering the truth with a golden laid, the luminous but obscuring veil of ordinary perception. By purifying the mind through ethical living, self-inquiry, and meditation, this veil thins, and we begin to see things as they truly are, interconnected, impermanent, and rooted in a single reality. The process of purification involves recognizing and letting go of habitual thought patterns that distort perception, such as attachment, aversion, and delusion. Neuroscience confirms that our cognitive patterns, habitual thoughts, interpretations, and emotional responses directly alter neural circuits. This is the essence of experience-dependent plasticity. A person with a tendency toward anxiety repeatedly activates the neural pathways associated with fear and threat detection. With each activation, these pathways strengthen, making the anxiety response more automatic and more easily triggered. The anxious person's brain becomes increasingly efficient at generating anxiety, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Conversely, intentionally cultivating thoughts and emotions such as gratitude, compassion, or joy can strengthen the neural pathways underlying these positive states. Research on loving-kindness, meditation, for example, has shown that practicing compassion toward oneself and others increases activity and connectivity in brain regions associated with positive emotion and empathy. The neural correlates of gratitude have also been studied, revealing increased activity in prefrontal and limbic regions involved in social bonding and reward processing. What we think, we become, neurologically as well as experientially. 3. Repetition is the engine of change. The Upanishads teach that self-discipline, sadhana, including practices like mantra repetition, ethical living, and daily meditation, is not about self-punishment or mere conformity to external rules. Rather, it is about consciously repatterning the mind's habitual tendencies, known in Sanskrit as sanskaras. These sanskaras are subtle impressions or latent tendencies accumulated through past actions and thoughts. They shape our automatic responses, our likes and dislikes, and our fundamental outlook on life. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which are deeply rooted in Upanishadic philosophy, describe the process of yoga as the stilling of the modifications of the mind, chitta vritti nirodha, which involves weakening the grip of sanskaras and cultivating new, more wholesome patterns through sustained practice, abhyasa, and detachment, vairagya. Repetition is the key, not mindless repetition, but repetition infused with awareness and intention. This ancient understanding is a perfect description of Hebbian learning and the principles of neuroplasticity. Repetition is precisely the mechanism by which neural pathways are strengthened and ingrained habits are formed. When a mantra is repeated with focused attention, the neural circuits involved in that repetition are activated and reinforced. When ethical precepts are consciously observed, the neural pathways associated with self-regulation and moral reasoning are strengthened. When meditation is practiced daily, the brain networks underlying attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness become more robust and efficient. The brain solidifies the pathways we use most frequently, pruning away those that fall into disuse. What we practice, we become, at the level of neural structure, mental habit, and conscious experience. The convergence here is not merely analogical, it is mechanistic. The Upanishads describe the process in psychological and phenomenological terms. Neuroscience describes the same process in biological and physical terms. They are two languages speaking about the same fundamental reality of human transformation through disciplined repetition. A unified practical insight, living the convergence. The convergence of Upanishadic wisdom and neuroplasticity offers a profound and empowering message that is not merely theoretical but deeply practical. It provides a framework for understanding how we can intentionally shape our minds and our lives, and it offers tools for doing so that have been tested and refined over millennia. The core principles. First, what you repeatedly think and do becomes your mental habit. Every thought, every emotional response, every action leaves a trace. Repeated frequently enough, these traces become grooves, neural pathways that shape automatic patterns of perception, feeling, and behavior. This is not a matter of willpower alone, it is a matter of neurobiology. The brain is designed to automate frequent patterns, freeing conscious attention for novelty and challenge. But this automation can work for us or against us, depending on what patterns we cultivate. Second, what you mentally practice, be it focus, compassion, anxiety, or distraction, physically shapes your brain's structure. This is the essence of experience-dependent neuroplasticity. The brain is not fixed, it is continuously remodeled by experience. This means that we are not prisoners of our past conditioning. Change is possible at any age, at any stage of life. The brain retains its plasticity, its capacity for change, throughout the lifespan. The practices that the Upanishads prescribe, meditation, self-inquiry, ethical living, are not merely philosophical exercises or moral codes. They are technologies for intentionally directing this neuroplastic process. Third, by bringing conscious awareness to your inner world, you can intentionally rewire your emotional responses and cognitive patterns. Awareness is the key. Without awareness, we remain caught in automatic patterns, reinforcing old habits without choice. With awareness, we can observe these patterns as they arise, choose whether to engage with them, and intentionally cultivate new, more wholesome patterns. This is the essence of mindfulness, the capacity to observe the mind's activity without being completely identified with it. And mindfulness itself, as research has shown, is a skill that can be developed through practice, and that practice changes the brain. Practical implications for daily life. What does this convergence mean for someone seeking to apply these insights in daily life? It means that the ancient practices of meditation, mantra repetition, self-inquiry, asking, "Who am I?" and ethical reflection are far more than cultural artifacts or religious rituals. They are evidence-based methods for harnessing neuroplasticity to cultivate a mind that is not only healthier and more resilient, but also more receptive to the deeper truths the Upanishads point toward. A daily meditation practice, even if only 10 or 15 minutes, is a form of mental training that strengthens attention, regulates emotion, and enhances self-awareness. Repeating a mantra with focused awareness is a way of consciously directing neural activity, reinforcing pathways associated with concentration and calm. Self-inquiry, the sustained investigation of the nature of the self, is a form of metacognitive reflection that can loosen identification with limiting beliefs and open up new possibilities of being. Ethical living, cultivating honesty, compassion, non-harm, and contentment, is a way of shaping behavior and thought in directions that reduce inner conflict and promote well-being, and these behavioral patterns in turn shape neural structure. The deeper promise. The Upanishads promise more than merely a healthier, happier mind. They point toward the realization of one's true nature as pure consciousness, beyond the limitations of the individual ego. This is not a promise that neuroscience can validate, as it lies beyond the domain of empirical measurement. But neuroscience can show that the practices aimed at this realization have real, measurable effects on the brain and mind. It can demonstrate that the path laid out by the ancient sages leads to genuine transformation at the level of neural structure and psychological function. The convergence of Upanishadic wisdom in neuroplasticity thus offers a meeting point for ancient and modern, spiritual and scientific, experiential and empirical. It affirms that the human mind is not fixed but profoundly malleable, that our thoughts and practices shape our brains and our lives, and that the disciplined cultivation of awareness is a powerful tool for transformation. It invites us to take seriously the ancient teaching that we can become what we practice, and to use that understanding to shape our lives with wisdom, compassion, and intention. In the end, the deepest insight from this convergence may be this: the mind that seeks to understand itself is also the mind that can transform itself. And in that transformation, we come closer to realizing the truth that the Upanishads have always pointed toward, the truth of who we really are.